Hello, good afternoon, Africa. Good morning, Africa. And good morning, the world. Mhm. We were talking about the. We shall talk about the. We shall talk about focusing. Farming is the key for Africans' push towards food security. Farming is the key to Africans' push towards food security. Towards food security. When we talk about food security, ensuring that food security, the basic right of people to the food they need is one of the greatest challenges facing the world community today. The challenge is most critical in lower income and food deficit countries. Out of the 86 countries that are defined as low income and food deficit countries, 43 are African countries. Despite overall the gains made in food production, food security on a global scale, many countries and all the regions have failed to make progress in recent decades. Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, produces less food pay. When the World Food Summit was held, organized by the Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations, FAO, in Rome in 1996, it reaffirmed the right of everyone to safe and nutritious food. Heads of state and government committed themselves to eradicate hunger in all countries, with the immediate goal of reducing the number of undernourished people to half the present level by 2015. One of the greatest challenges we have to achieve this goal in Africa, and especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where chronic hunger is widespread. African countries confront many significant political, economic, social, and environmental constraints to increase food production. In spite of the constraints, Africans are making some progress in improving food security. Improvements in democracy and political stability in some countries have enhanced the prospects for renewed food production, distribution, and purchase. Markets are free and private investment is growing where there's been a restoration of peace and security. People have been able to resume farming and agriculture. Production has increased. Many of Africa's agriculture, rural, and development problems have been related to misguided policies by our leaders and by those that have been elected to run the affairs of those various countries. Africa needs to focus on its agriculture. Africa needs to look at what is it that Africa, when you look at the war in Ukraine, you talk about the war in Middle East between Egypt, Israel, and Palestine. You agree with me to say Africa needs to depend on its own for food. 80% of water, of the good water table land, Africa has what it takes. But the question that comes in is that does Africa has the capacity to feed the world? The answer is yes. What does Africa need? Africa needs to reinvest. African governments and the African people, we ourselves, we have to invest in agriculture, because it is the only way agriculture that would help us even to fight the levels of poverty. There will be no need for us to rush to the IMF because we want to help our countries to sustain them. No, what will be there, because once you have food, you have self-sustainable, you sustain yourself as countries. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen out there, that I'll give example like my country, Zambia. Zambia's got the vast land, good water table, good weather for agriculture. And over the last 2 years, Zambia has been feeding the Democratic Republic of Congo because there's been due to the conflict in that country, the agriculture there is. So it shows that by 2030, Africa can feed the whole world. If our government at least were able to allocate at least 45% of its budget allocation to the agriculture sector, Africa would have done better. So when you look at the food security in Africa, the world per capita food production, food needs vary dramatically from the region to region. Among countries and within regions in the world, this means that approaches to food security have to be tailored to each institution. Over in Africa, however, population growth, agriculture production abilities are critical factors when considering food security in Africa. Although I'll give you the populations of the sub-Saharan Africa are still expanding by 3% a year, enough to double the number of people in one generation. In Africa, food production continues to grow more slowly than population. In contrast to every other region of the world, the capital food production has declined since the 1970s. It's estimated that 40% of the total population of the sub-Saharan Africa goes hungry, and that the figure will increase to 50% by the year 2025. Poverty in sub-Saharan Africa, the most frequent cause is hunger. Because Southern Africa has always been hit with a lot of climatic. Talk about climate change. So when you talk about famine is the only way that would improve our GDP, because at least per household, we are looking at each per household. So you need to understand that the concept of the African Union needs to focus on how does Africa participate in the global market in the agriculture sector. Africa has got the land. Africa can make billions and billions to transform the lives of its people. But due to politics, our politicians would prefer to invest in, yes, we need infrastructure. Infrastructure for agriculture to thrive, we must make sure that we invest heavily in our infrastructure. But what type of infrastructure are we talking about? I'll give an example. We're talking about infrastructure. If we want to construct roads to interconnect our countries to countries, our provinces to provinces, our cities to cities, Africa, as much as Africa would want to borrow from the IMF for its construction, Africa needs to focus on its original policy. When I say original policy of Africa, we never depended. If I would say 50 years ago, 60 years ago, Africa would feed Japan, would feed Brazil. So you look at all these countries. That I'm talking about. It's about how do we help agriculture. Agriculture is one of the most undermined investment in Africa by we ourselves, or African people. Africa needs, because we must understand that Africa can never develop without cooperating partners. We live in a global community. We must interact with each other. As we discuss these issues, we must talk about, because Africa cannot ignore technology in agriculture, because technology has come to stay, not to go. You talk about agriculture. I'll give example by my country. We have 10 provinces. In these 10 provinces, each province has a particular potential that it can produce to meet on the market actually itself. You have the eastern part of Zambia, you have the northern part of Zambia. All these produce maize. We have the western part of Zambia that also can produce cassava. We have the southern part of Zambia that also can produce beans. We have the western part where it floods, it can produce rice that can feed the entire SADC region. But it will require a lot of efforts from all of us. It will require from all of us we need to understand that agriculture that we are talking about as Africa is that Africa itself, it can never develop without the cooperating partners. When I say cooperating partners, we talk about countries like China. China have over the years evolved their agriculture. You talk about Israel. Over the last years, decades, they have been improving their agriculture. What is it that we can learn ourselves from these people? What can we learn from them? What can we learn? How do we help our people? How does it help us to address the levels of poverty? Because minerals at one time or the other, they will diminish in the continent of Africa. They will be finished. They are not replaceable. African governments needs to start moving away from minerals into start now investing in agriculture. We can pause for now by mining our minerals and focus on agriculture, because we can feed the world. We have seen that the world after the war in Ukraine, the world faced a calamity. We also remember we talk about the COVID-19. These are things that have actually made us Africans to wake up and to realize to say, what is it that we can do? Dependence syndrome should be a thing of the past. Africa must focus on what is it that Africa can produce. We talk about, for example, African governments needs to sign a memorandum of understandings. They need to, you exchange agriculture ideas. What Africa needs is serious agriculture endeavors. We need to discover at each country has something that it can produce that the other country can benefit. We must learn to trade inter-country per country by focusing on our investment, because by 20, if we can invest 2 billion or $30 billion today, in the next 10 years, we'll be able to recover maybe $15 trillion from the agriculture, because the world as it is now, Africa seems to be favored with the climate change. With the climate change that is happening, Africa seems to be the right continent to be the right continent to provide food to the African people. It may take time, but at the end of the day, we are capable, by making sure that Africa is able to feed the people of the United States of America, is able to feed the people of Germany, is able to feed the people of Brazil, is able to feed the lowest countries that have been forgotten in the world. Africa is capable of doing that. So when you look at what we must focus again as Africa is that how do we help our agriculture sector to perform? So our agriculture sector can only work if we ourselves, we ask ourselves honest questions. And these honest questions are simple questions. What is it that we have done since the establishment of the African Union? Because it had agriculture sections and branches. How does Africa find itself a beggar when Africa's got land? So for me, I've always believed that the government and the private sector must partner to increase investment in the agriculture sector. An African woman with a hoe in hand is the default symbol of agriculture in Africa. According to the late Fidelis Ngoma, the African academian, former Harvard Kennedy School professor, Mr. Ngoma used that a woman with a hoe on the continent of face, women grow 70% of Africans' food on the smallholder farms, a tax actioned by physical labor. Now, with Africa's population expected to double by 2050, the continent must ditch the hoe in favor of modern technology, which will complete the same task for more far efficiently. A transformation from small-scale subsistence farms to mechanized, the more commercially viable farms is essential for this for Africa. The current the mechanization levels on farms across Africa are very low, with a number of tractors in sub-Saharan Africa ranging from 1.3 per square meter in Rwanda to 43% square meters in South Africa, compared with 128 per kilometer in India and 116 per kilometer square in Brazil. So when you read the report, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization report, a UN specialized agency that champions efforts to defeat hunger, Africa overall has less than 2 tractors per 1,000 hectares of cropland. There are 10 tractors per 1,000 hectares in South Asia and Latin America. Without mechanized agriculture, productivity suffers drastically, lowering farmers' earnings and routes to alliance for a green revolution in Africa. Africa, with an organization funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates and Rockefeller Foundations that seeks to promote agriculture transformation in Africa, in Africa, they have continued to invest by helping our African governments. Africa currently spends a whopping $35 billion annually on food inputs. According to a report taken according to the African Development Bank, which projects that if the current trend continues, food inputs could rise to 110 billion by 2050. Africa should be the breakfast of the world. Technologies to achieve Africa's green revolution exist, but are mostly just sitting on the shelves. The challenge is lack of supportive policies to ensure that they are scaled up and reach millions of our farmers. The world has to support Africa. As you remember that African leaders in 2003, African leaders adopted the Maputo Declaration on Agriculture and Food Security, which requires countries to allocate at least 10% of public expenditure to agriculture, with the goal of achieving 600% in the sector. Yet, 23 years later, only 20 countries have at least achieved the 6% growth in agriculture sector, stalling Africans' dream of a food revolution. These countries are Benin, Burundi, Cape Verde, Ethiopia, Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and Togo. In addition to the Maputo Declaration, the Malambo Matombe panel, a group of African and international experts, recommended in 2014 that African countries should develop national agriculture mechanization investment plans as a critical step to increasing productivity. In a report in 2018, the FMP listed 12 African countries, including Ethiopia, Malawi, Mali, Morocco, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Zambia, as having demonstrated strong growth in mechanized agriculture and consequently achieved higher output. Successive evaluation will only be key to tackling major challenges on the continent. The report concludes from sparing food inputs to cost rampant rural and unemployment. The report recommends that using public-private partnerships to develop local machinery industries to ensure affordable and appropriate technology is in use. It also recommends that the private sector to invest in mechanized fruit tax waivers and smart subsidies on agriculture. Finally, as I conclude, it is fancy that renewable digital Africa can be a leapfrog the stages of technology development other regions have to undertake, making its marginalization process both swift and extremely lucrative and accorded, so that it's able to attract our people out there. When I say our people, these are our friends, investors out there who are willing to come and invest in African agriculture. And Africa is welcome because Africa is open for business. Not only will mechanization result in increased employment, it will also improve land management and productivity, as well as the quality of crops that are produced. To achieve these goals, farmers in developing countries must spend more on fertilizers, seeds, and agrochemicals. Some private sector initiatives should have stepped into the breach created by unsuccessful state and donor-led efforts to promote mechanization. For example, in Nigeria, a tractor technology startup is a quickly expanding our program that gives farmers temporary access to tractors on demand. Farmers can request a tractor via a text message to an agent. When a tractor field that might take 40 days to prepare for planting by hand can be pumped in 8 hours. It's also cheaper to rent a tractor than to hire farm workers. It means that competitive in the markets with relative low cost of labor, but paying a human being to do this such more expensive than a tractor. So labor is also increasing hard to find as more Nigerians are moving to the existing farmers get older. Using a tractor can help farmers plant fields in each time, because planting with a tractor is also more consistent than planting by hand. It can also improve yields. In Zambia, Lent to Own, a non-government organization founded in 2010, leases equipment such as pumps, pressers, tractors, shearers, and bicycles to farmers. I'm talking about Zambia. One of the advantages of maize in Africa is that it can potentially attract youth to farms, to put a dent in Africans' high youth unemployment level, which accounts for about 60% total of unemployed. For example, the Zimbabwean's young agri-entrepreneurs instructed 3 years ago, the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Counter loaned Gift Chakweras and Shepherd Chakwera and a plant and a shearer with which they started the business. Their company is now offering shearing and planting services to almost 150 farms in Mwanga village in the northwest capital of Harare. They graduated from the agriculture mechanizing sector training program managed by the Zimbabwean government, sharing from over 300 tons of maize. But these young Zimbabweans could outraise assets in the senior systems if they were funded heavily. In short, African government must come up with cooperatives that invest in agriculture as to address the youth unemployment challenges. This can only work when our African leaders able to invite our friends. We need technology for us, because agriculture without technology is a failed mission. Because poverty eradication can only succeed if we ourselves are able to invest in agriculture, because agriculture is the only way to go. So you look at the continent of Africa, our government must come up with cooperatives. They must come up with funds. I would suggest an agriculture youth fund. There must be government have to introduce youth agriculture fund to help elevate the levels of poverty, to address the issues of youth of unemployment in addressing these issues. So this can only take place if our African governments are able to invest by making sure that we come up with bodies, with cooperatives, agriculture cooperatives for our youths. And our target, it must be that our government must be able permits to export. This will be able to help to create jobs, to reduce levels of poverty. By time that we'll be reaching the 2050 vision, Africa would have produced 30 million metric tons of different varieties of crops that we can able to invite forex for our countries and able to invest, because there will be no need for African government to start borrowing money to construct agriculture. The same agriculture will be funded itself. It will pay for our civil servant salaries. It will address us. It will sponsor us. It will help us buy whatever we want to buy. We must, for now, Africa must focus on agriculture. The world is at war with climate change. Africa must invest in its agriculture, scientific research. Our soil is good. Our waters are good. It would be an appropriate and the right decision that African regions, I'm talking about SADC, ECOWAS, African Union, I'm talking about the East Africa Union. I'm talking about COMESA, all these institutions, all these regions. They must put their number one goal, on their agenda must be agriculture. Each government and each year, the Maputo Declaration should be actualized and implemented. Because the Maputo Declaration addresses on Africa. Africa needed to fund itself. Africa needs to provide food for its own refugees, for its own. There is no way Africa can be demanding food from asking. It was so imbalancing for our leaders. For our leaders to fund themselves, parading themselves, going to beg for food in Ukraine and in Russia. I felt bad. What a cursed continent are we as Africa? Why should our African leaders parade themselves to go and beg for wheat or for food in Ukraine when we have in Africa, we have the land, we have the water, we have the good weather? What Africa needs is a mindset shift that African leaders have to have what we call living a lasting legacy in addressing these economic issues that are facing our people. Africa is capable of feeding itself. But what Africa lacks today, Africa does not have the right mindset to transform it into the world powerful continent as it is. So Africa needs to focus on its ideology. Africa needs to make sure that as we address matters to do with ourselves as Africa, we must ask ourselves the most important questions. My prayer is that every African gets an understanding of who we are as Africa, what our assignment is. Once we get that understanding, we will appreciate our continent, and we have one vision going forward. It is even more important for the leaders to understand the purpose of which God created Africa. If our leaders have no idea, there is no idea the reason for which Africa exists, then how do we expect them to lead us where we need to be? So really, in order to move forward, we need a renewal of the mind that will cause transformation. We as Africa require a change of heart. We need to bring back love in our communities, in our countries. Bringing back that love will bring back the presence of God. God is love. So when we love one another as Africa, we are assured of a prosperous Africa. We all have greatness within ourselves as African continent. No doubt about that. We may not have the same gift, talents, and strengths, but to sure we have all something to offer. All of us, we were created to answer to one problem or the other. No matter how small or big, the problem we were created to solve is that we are a very important part of the whole plan of the universe. The world needs us as much as we need the world. No one is born to be a failure. We were all born to succeed. We need to know this. Once we know that we are born to win, Africa will always get up when we fall. At the end of the day, it is not what we tell ourselves about ourselves that really matters. I am the most influential person in my life. If I say to myself, then I can. Transformation is possible if you make the decision to transform for success. Africa needs to be serious. I would like to explain why you should ask yourself that development, first of all, it is not how old the nation is, because we know of very old nations like India. We talk about Egypt, that over 200 years, these countries had invested in agriculture. These countries have continued to be strong in the agriculture sector. You look at small countries like Canada and Australia, which are about 150 years. Today they are considered countries, but all these countries have continued in investing in agriculture. They feed Africa, they feed their own people throughout their history. It is also not out of the amount of natural resources Africa has, because countries like Japan that are 80% mountainous and have unsuitable farming or agricultural land are ranking amongst the highest in the world economy. Switzerland, on the other hand, does not grow any cocoa, but produces the world's best chocolates, the best milk products. A small country size of a province in Kinshasa, in Lagos, in Lusaka, in Abuja, in Accra, in Cape Town. So if we continue we must look at if we compare the intellectuals from the rich and the poor countries, it will show you that no significant intellectual differences are there. We have been blessed with some of the best brains in the African continent when it comes to the best African continent that have produced from the African. Color or race does not have any influence on the wealth of Africa. So it does not matter if you are black or you are white. We are all made in the image and likeness of God. So what is the difference between the rich developing countries and the poor and the developing countries? In my opinion, the difference is our attitude towards life and everything around us. So what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say here, I'm trying to say, look, Africa cannot continue. It cannot continue to be a beggar. Zambia, my beloved country. Let us take a close look at my country, Zambia. God blessed us with the beautiful country rich in a manner of natural resources. Zambia holds nearly 45% of the fresh waters in the sub-Saharan African region. I'll repeat again. Zambia holds nearly 45% of the fresh waters in the sub-Saharan region of Africa. Zambia has the capacity to export electricity to the whole Southern African region, SADC region. Zambia has the potential to become the breakfast for Africa. Zambia has a climate and a geographic landscape that can grow diverse types of crops in every season, every given season. Although landlocked, Zambia reaches out to its 8 neighbor countries like a mother holds on to her baby. So caring and so protective. Zambia, mother Zambia, how have we failed you? Rich in mineral resources, oil and gas, much more still to be discovered. Apart from the wealth in natural resources that Zambia has, we also need to look at look at ourselves. The Zambia actually means God's own. Was named after the Zambezi in Ilunda, in Yambezi, meaning God's liver. As you can see, God had earmarked us to be the Christian nation before we were formed as a country. The declaration of Zambia as a Christian nation by late Frederick Chiluba in 1991 was just a confirmation of what Zambia has always been. Just as Israel was a chosen nation for the purpose of God to show the rest of the world, of the nations, that it is like to live under the leadership of the God. Zambia is greatly favored by God. It's a nation, it has chosen to show off its glory. Zambia has got the best land, the beautiful land, the most fertile land in the SADC region. Zambia, the water bodies in Zambia, they do not go dry. But what has been killing Zambia and Africa, I think for me, is we do not take responsibility of our own problems, of our own economic issues. We have not addressed issues that have affected our people because we have chosen not to listen for what is happening for ourselves. So we look at what is it. In my conclusion, I would say a few things. I would say most of us want to blame it on our past. But this is my advice in my conclusion. Use your past to learn from it. Let it remain in the past. Deal with all the pain that comes with the past as you take an audit of your past and think to make amends with any you could be. Take responsibility. That's what it means. Repair the mistakes. Don't just go around following each country I've seen our leaders parading themselves before the king, the crown prince. Why? Is because Africa suffers from the mindset, from the mentality poverty. Our leaders can go and beg for investment while Africa has got the land, has got the resources, got the minerals. Africa needs to focus on agriculture. Agriculture must be the top priority agenda for our leaders every time that our leaders convey to share ideas. This will not only take place from our leaders, it calls for all of us, the private sector, all the investors who wants to invest must consider investing in agriculture, especially Zambia. Zambia is a very good, very good when it comes to agriculture. Our investment policy is friendly. Our investment policy in Zambia are friendly. Zambia is one of the friendly countries in the African region. So those who want to come to invest in Zambia, you're welcome. Come and invest in agriculture. There is vast land. There are many opportunities when it comes to agriculture sector in Zambia. Of course, it will have to be a 50-50 arrangement. 50% of yours, 50% of our people. I would want to thank you. Thank you very much to the producers in the studio for hosting me. I end from here and I say have a blessed week. Enjoy the rest of the week. God bless Africa. God bless the Republic of Zambia. God bless you, my brothers and sisters.